We've got a housing crisis. Can you imagine a world where seniors can have safe and affordable housing? How's that possible? It's happening. We're getting in focus today with Renée Wetselaar of St. Matthew's House, who's going to tell us about how this is possible. Join us. Housing affordability is stark and bleak. We don't have enough housing. But yet in this bleakness, Renée, you provide hope.
I appreciate that you see that, Lee, because really that is part of what is driving me personally and what drives St. Matthew's House in moving forward on something. When COVID hit, we really were positioning ourselves to try and transition away from being a food bank kind of agency, which was dangerous to say we're going to close a food bank. But I really felt that we needed to focus in more with people to provide hope. And standing at a food bank and in a long lineup and being handed a bag of groceries it's not hopeful, right? It's just not hopeful. But having someone come to your house and deliver some food and pet your cat and talk to you a little bit and check things out and call you the next day and ask how you're doing, that's hope. Yeah. That's hope. So through all that, there was a bit of a situation where we decided to close this food bank, and we learned that the property actually was going to fall into the street. So while we had an asset, it wasn't a very good one. But I had been working in affordable housing in policy and advocacy for over 10 years. Okay. And so really, I kind of knew that this is somewhere I wanted to take this agency at some point in time. So it seemed like a perfect opportunity in the midst of chaos. Let's introduce something that might be anchoring for everyone. And so when I introduced the notion of building deeply affordable housing for Black and Indigenous seniors, our board really wow, they took a big breath. They said, wow, that's, pretty impactful. Yeah. But this is something I think we want to do because we had already been having the conversation as an agency, as a board, as a thought leadership about what happened when George Floyd was murdered. And that was a big impetus for our agency to really start making some changes. We had been doing EDI work. We had been really looking at our hiring, our governance, all of that stuff. But really then also talking about truth and reconciliation and anti-Black racism, impacts of colonization in an agency that was rooted in Anglican faith. And so to drive this group forward on something like this was pretty impactful. And to say to a group that, you've created a lot of harm to people.
Yeah.
Right?
That's ownership. Eh?
Yeah. You've hurt people. And even our little agency can do something big. Right? And so we went for it. And my years of working in affordable housing meant that I had some great contacts, New Commons Development being one of them. And they really helped light a fire under all of us to say, let's go for this rapid housing initiative funding. And, all of that was announced right before COVID as well. So we started really going for it. And although we were turned down for the first round, we were accepted for the second round. And I really think it was the tenaciousness, but also the collaboration that we were bringing to the table. So just taking it back for a second here, you heard me mention, 15 Black and Indigenous seniors. What the heck is Renée Wetselaar doing with that? What's this white chick doing with? Yeah. Where does all that come from, right? So I've been working in equity work probably, I'm going to say almost my whole life, being born in a Dutch Christian Reformed family, realizing that, we hurt a lot of people through colonization in South Africa, all around the world. And just as a little girl, feeling I really wanted to own that.
Wow.
In some weird way. Yes, I know. But really feeling indignant about it at a young age. And also, I remember at a young age, my dad being very conservative, of course. So he was the Diefenbaker guy. But I was the NDP kid, at 13, my dad and I would watch elections together, and I'd be rooting for Ed Broadbent, and he'd be rooting for his guy. But again, a lot of, where this comes from this early, I think, seeing of inequity, growing up, being the only girl in a Dutch Christian Reformed family of 6 boys.
Oh boy.
Right? That is certainly something that, compelled me to want to try and do something different and to find hope for myself. But also being an artist, being literally, born, as they say, born an artist. Creativity is something that runs in my blood. It's actually what really holds me together. Yeah. That's my true fiber of being. Anyways, so all of that work as a kid led me to want to lean into equity work in the city, in the community, in Hamilton. First as an artist, doing a lot of work in the arts community, around community building, community arts projects, collaborative arts projects. But then, I don't know if you remember in mid 1990s, NDP government, there was a big bailout package presented to the city of Hamilton for the Red Hill Expressway by David Crombie. And in this package, they were not going to build this giant expressway. We were going to have a nice arterial route. It was looking at good climate action. And they were going to give $10 million to the arts community in the city of Hamilton, $5 million to buy buildings on Barton Street, and $5 million to set up an investment fund for artists.
It's huge.
That's
huge. Like visionary.
The government at the time had brought over a guy named Robin Murray. He was a community economics development specialist, and they actually set up a CED secretariat at the time in that government. And I, through some fluke, some way of the world, I ended up working on this project with them, the Hamilton rep, pulling together let's go look and see all the buildings on Barton Street that we're going to assemble and create live workspace for artists. And let's look at all the alternative banking practices that are out there to create an investment fund.
Wow.
We did a lot of work. I don't know if you've heard of the artist Aita Sadhu. Yeah. She's a writer. She was one of the folks working with the secretariat at the time. Again, really pulling together equity, community building, and pulling that into Hamilton where this was very new.
For sure.
Very new.
Yeah.
This is like 1994, 95. Yeah. But learning about community economic development in that time, for me anyways, really set me up to look at things differently in my community and how equity work can be bound up with development and urban development, and how good governance and decision-making creates hope, it creates equality. So that's all the work that we were doing. I remember, we were getting death threats from folks because they thought, they could buy a building and then we were going to pay for it for them. And it was it was crazy. Anyways, long story short is that Mike Harris got elected and he took all the money back. So we had to take all these offers off of buildings and shut down this investment fund and just say goodbye. So after that, I got hired to work at the Workers' Arts and Heritage Center in Hamilton. It's a labor museum. I don't know if people...
It's important.
Museum. It's good work. So after having done this highly politicized project, with the NDP and death threats and just I thought this was going to be great. Working for a labor movement, this is going to be great. Easy, right? It brought a whole set of learning, obviously, around workers' rights, labor's rights, but also women's rights, queer rights. I mean, it just, for me, brought all of that world together in working for this museum. And so my marriage had come to an end early in 2000. And I'd come out and, that in and of itself was a whole evolutionary process, coming out when you're 40
Yeah, for sure.
Through all of this work. But in that, I also began to understand equity in a whole different light again. My own place in the world and reinventing myself and who am I. And learning from that I have privilege as a white woman. I walk around in the sack of white privilege every single day. I walk out the front door. I'm the face of the oppressor. I own it. That's how I think. So with that thinking, I decided to go back to school and I got my master's in globalization and the human condition from McMaster University and really started to dig deeper into themes around urban development, around economic development, global economic development, global health, global mental health, world culture, all of that. And really was able to take that knowledge and again apply it to the work at the Workers' Arts and Heritage Center to build more equity and drive more equity into arts and labor and culture. What I'm saying is, I think really when you ask me affordable housing, now I'm going kind of wide berth around affordable housing, but affordable housing, when you talk about it, at its very base is a human right. And for me, going from that very principle is a first step. It's a first acknowledgement. It's a founding principle.
Yeah.
And so going back to our little project, I said to our board of directors, when you think about it, we have a tiny piece of land that we really didn't own and we took it away from Indigenous populations, right? Sitting in the middle of Hamilton on a block owned by Richard Beasley, the founder of Hamilton. Why don't we think about a way that we can give it back? And that's, how the whole notion of this equity-driven, affordable housing build, coming out of Truth and Reconciliation and recognizing the impacts of the slave trade.
Yeah.
There. Boom.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the Rapid Housing Initiative funding brought us just about $3.5 million. There's nothing rapid about the Rapid Housing Initiative, and I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, all the pricing for the project was done pre-COVID.
Oh, boy.
So when it came time to actually, get everything together, prices had gone up by 30%, et cetera, et cetera. So the city of Hamilton, it has really been a great backer of this project. They helped us find money through the province, the Ontario Housing Priority Initiative Fund. And so that's how we've been able to come up with the $8 million for this project. When I was at CP Planning a couple of weeks ago, you heard me talk. The whole experience of working with the city in even getting the application process language changed is something that I even focused on in this process, and probably much to the chagrin of everyone around me. I kept sending application forms back saying, these are Black and Indigenous people, not vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Kept sending that, and they finally changed the form. But here is a white chick sitting there, sending back your form 5 times. I'm not signing this for my draw, for my money until you get this right. So I take a lot of passion, but a lot of drive because I feel a great sense of injustice in the world.
Yeah.
Around why we need to do work like this and why affordable housing is at the core of all of this.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things too is I'm based in Toronto and I see the affordability issue growing so much that people are picking up and leaving, and many people are headed towards Hamilton. But I also think as the Toronto money goes into Hamilton, Hamilton is also becoming less and less affordable.
Absolutely.
There's no, I don't think there's anywhere where people are like, oh, the cost of living is going up everywhere. And so the work that you're doing is inspirational. And I really wanted to kind of, shed a light on the fact that in the bleakness of all things, you can bring people together and bring players. And we were talking about this just before we were filming about how the feds came to the table. It was really a multi-level government coming together. The feds, the province, the municipal government, but also even your developer. Can you talk a little bit about sort of
Yeah. Okay. There's a fund, the rapid fund, but there's more than just applying for a grant.
Yeah. I think it's funny because every discussion, every meeting, every time we get together to talk about the project, and we have weekly meetings, sorry. My mission and drive means that equity is interwoven into every part of the discussion, whether it's where are we getting the finance from, who are we hiring from, what are our hiring practice from, who are the suppliers, what is this company's equity framework around, bringing in LGBTQ plus folks. And so just really, I just keep asking those questions of everyone. And that process has really driven everyone together to become really tightly knit around recognizing what the core issue here is, right? Yeah. It's affordable housing for some of the most deeply impacted people in our community when it comes to inequity, when it comes to inequality, when it comes to food security, when it comes to being overrepresented in jail. You know, it's all there.
It's all there. I mean, now when we talk about deeply affordable, what does this mean? Once this is built, okay, so you had the land, you got the funds for building, everybody chipped in a little bit of money, right? How long is it going to take? And then when it comes onto the market and people are able to live in there, what's the deeply affordable component?
So, so it's coming on stream in the fall. We have had, of course, delay after delay after delay, and you don't need to go into that with you, but we're actually having a ribbon cutting on December 14th. So I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah, it's taken a while, and you just really have to hang with it. But I'm trying to think of all the people that worked on this. They really became embedded in the notion of equity and inclusion as being a core principle for doing the work. And for them, that meant that they had to hang it together, and they realized that there was no profit in this. This was not about making a profit.
Yeah.
This is not about, trying to showcase something, even though it is showcasing a modular build in a very, very tight spot, missing metal type work. It's perfect. But the developer, has come to the point where they have said, we're not drawing any profit out of this. We want everyone to win out of this. So we can come to that deeply affordable place. So when it comes to that, we will have an agreement with the city of Hamilton for deep affordability for 40 years on that building.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of conversations, a lot of networking and skills. I think, even in having this conversation, we live in a world where people are afraid of AI, people are afraid of the skills and all this stuff. But I think one thing that everybody needs to focus on is the power of community, the power of networks.
Oh, yes. And I think about young people looking at, how did you get to where you are? And, what is the secret sauce? And I just always say it's about people. It is about relationships. It's about having conversations, even with people that you think you're diabolically opposed to, right? I was joking in the car on the way here. I worked at a labor museum that got money out of Mike Harris.
Yeah.
If that's not a lot of dialogue and bringing people together, I don't know what is. But yes, all of this work is relational. And so the work that I'm doing now, I'm working with bureaucrats that I've built relationships with at City Hall for over 25 years. And I think sometimes people give bureaucrats a bad rap.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Easy enough to do. But I'm telling you, these folks have been there a long time, and they've seen a lot of things come and go. But if you can build that trust relationship with them, and I'm not talking about it in a way where you're going to get in the back door or get any favors. It's not like that. They want to participate. They love coming to our meetings. It's a joyful experience. And part of it, of course, is I bring that, right? I feel so excited about what we're doing. And, when we feel a little bit crappy about something, I just keep saying, look, we did it. We did it in the middle of a pandemic. We pulled all these people together. And if this little agency can do it, then, others can do it, no problem.
It's like the Thomas the Train. I think I can. I think
Yes.
I can. Right.
It totally is. It totally is. Yeah.
And I think I just want to take a moment, like bureaucrats, like their job description is to serve. And so it's, like they are important. They're part of that puzzle. And sometimes you meet people and you're like, oh, like when people say like when you say they get a bad rap, but I feel like so many bureaucrats who I've met have committed their lives to public service and take that very seriously. And when there's an opportunity for them to be seen, it's so powerful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, we are working, St. Matthew's House is working pretty closely with the homelessness programs and division at the City of Hamilton. We support the encampment team. That means we have a team of 12 that roves around the city, providing support to people who are unhoused, trying to connect them to the housing that doesn't exist. So you can imagine the frustration that exists, right? And now we have just started operating a warming bus.
Yeah.
So that just came on stream on Friday night. And so this bus operates from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and it drives a circuit across the city. There's a whole bunch of stops along the way and people get on the bus and they can stay on for one ride one guy stayed on last night for 2 trips and he got a good 6 hours sleep.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
It's these little tiny things. And again, I know I hear people say it's not enough. And I hear that and I agree. But I say to the bureaucrats, I'm not going to yell at you about that because you're trying your best.
Yeah.
Right. There are other powers that are way beyond you. But if we can help just move it a little bit instead of just
help people like get through the night.
Yes. Instead of just resisting and saying it's not enough. I feel that we are giving at least a little bit of hope. Yeah. It's the hope that we have to offer. And I know that many times these little measures are life-saving.
Absolutely. I mean, homelessness is a big thing. More and more people are finding themselves in precarious situations where they're one paycheck away from losing the roof over their heads. There's great warriors out there who are trying to help. We also know food bank usage is going up and even more by the missing middle class, right? People are earning income in 6 figures because it's not enough. It doesn't go that far with housing. And I think when you talk about this warming bus, like how are you funding it?
So it is being funded by the tax levy in the City of Hamilton. So taxpayers are paying for it.
Yeah.
And the HSR is providing the bus. The Hamilton Street Railway Company is providing the bus. So it's, a city bus and all that. And we are also operating a warming center, a daytime warming center. And we're working with one of the Anglican churches and saying, hey, come and help. And, they're more than happy to help. So we're trying to build the seamless service. So it is a bit of donations, goodwill, good old-fashioned charity. I was just thinking too, with the social justice part to come, the social justice and the story of what we need more of is just evolving. I've already heard stories of people's experience from the first 2 nights, and we're already talking about what this means and how we can build on this and, how we can actually make some change happen.
It's like starting, instead of being faced with, we're not solving the whole solution, you start with one piece and see how it goes and respond to it.
Exactly.
And then more and more people see it, like how can be a part of it. So is there a call to action for getting funds or anything like that, or how does that work?
Well, of course. I mean, we're funded by the United Way, and I can't say enough how great a funder they are. They're so flexible for us. And so if folks, are giving the United Way, please do. If you're going to give to a food bank, don't give any canned food. Have a look at what people really want and listen to the stories of what people get and how they can't use it.
See, I don't think we have enough of those stories because people don't necessarily, there's a disconnect, right? We have a growing divide between the have and have nots.
Yep.
And so where do people have it? And this is why having wonderful people like you who are in frontline service, who have seen it, you can share that story.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a developmental evaluation when we closed our food bank. Like I told you, it was not met with happy, people were very angry about it. What are you closing a food bank for? That's terrible. And, my stance was food banks aren't the answer to food security. And I told you earlier what our answer, or what, not our answer, but what we're trying to do differently. And that's interrupt things rather than keep things the same.
Yeah.
And bringing food to people instead of making someone take a whole day out of their lives just to get
in line.
Food, and most of which will be canned, and they don't have the right things to actually turn it into a meal.
Yeah.
So we did a developmental evaluation of our food security program when we first started the food delivery. And we just kept asking people questions, and we took their inputs and made improvements to the point where now we have fresh meat and, pulses and onions, and making sure that we're bringing flavor, and, that we're looking at cultural equity lens when we look at the stuff that we're bringing into the food. All our chicken is halal, for example. What we're also kind of looking at is that call that we're making, right, is that life-saving call, that next step. We need to do that to break that cycle of food bank use. And I know because of the numbers, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? How do you call all those people back? But for us, it's breaking cycles of food insecurity, but it's also breaking cycles of isolation. So we started to learn all these things with this survey. And so the question at the beginning is, are we providing food security, or are you getting food security? And by the end of the 3-month survey, the story became, no, you're providing life security. And I thought it was so interesting that the story around food went to life. Of course, food is life, but it came from the kind of perspective that once we were talking about food, the food became the gateway to the other issues or other parts of the conversation that were going on with people.
Yeah.
Right? And again, it goes back to that relationship. So if you have that relationship, you actually can impact someone.
Absolutely.
So learning that, we actually were able to get funding to hire a paralegal.
Okay.
So bringing a paralegal on with social workers has been, again, life-changing, quite dynamic for people. And there's not a lot of social service agencies that have a paralegal on staff. It's kind of new and novel, and we're working with our legal clinic. But what we're finding is, of course, people aren't always broken when it comes to affordable housing or food security. We tend to think of people who come to our programs as broken and needing help, right? Particularly physical health or mental health. Mm-hmm. So many people, like you identified, no, they're coming to a broken system. They're being evicted because their landlord is not treating them fairly, right? They haven't been able to fill their taxes because their literacy levels are low. All these inequities, right, that are tiny in some ways when you think about it. But when you can provide services beyond just the food, now with the paralegal support, we're getting into eviction prevention. It really starts to dig deep and unpeel that onion a little bit more, right? Yeah. It does start with that delivery, and then it just unfolds from there.
Well, it's a cycle, right? And when you can sort of interrupt a cycle, you can create a new pathways. And this is mental health cycles, addiction cycles, all of those different cycles. But I think that what you're doing is so phenomenal. And I think that, the question of, okay, what can, recognizing your privilege and being a warrior for change, what can the average person do?
Well, get involved in boards of directors and agencies so that they can get the capacity together to build affordable housing. I mean, CP Planning did the study on, ending discrimination in this practice. One of the calls that I put out to people is join boards of directors where you can have an impact. Get on a housing board of directors so that you can learn more about building affordable housing, become part of the conversation. I knew schmick about housing, right? I'm an artist. What would I know? Yeah. And I didn't go to school for urban planning or any of that stuff. but I can have a pretty good conversation with you around inclusionary zoning and what that means, or how important it is to have secondary suites, or what does an accessory unit mean, or all of these things are important. Lee, what I want to really just talk a little bit about here too is when you have to become tenacious as a person, like I have had to. You heard me talking about growing up with all these boys and, having to fight back. And my way of breaking the cycle, actually, I joined the Army.
I know. I was like, what?
Well, I was told my whole life as a girl, you can't do that. You can't do that. Watching my brothers get to do this, that, and the other. And I just decided, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that narrative.
Yeah.
And so, I joined the Army. It was reserves, but I played in a war game. That was the first post-Vietnam war game with the United States. Across the border in Fort Drum. And, had a big kind of experience around all that. Experienced some sexual abuse while I was in the Army, unfortunately. So that, obviously had an impact on me. But out of that, then turned around and joined a punk rock band with my partner at the time, and spent 5 years touring around and playing and learning about my own creativity and tenacity, and yet again hanging out with a lot of men on the road in punk rock in the mid 80s, and not a lot of women out there, right? That was a bit of a scene, but that certainly impacted me and taught me a lot of lessons. My third album, I always say, is my son. I ended up, having a kid, which was great, and that whole experience. But I became quite depressed. I developed postpartum depression after, and it never really went away. And experienced a lot of depression. I have had cancer, so I've survived ovarian cancer in all of this. I also have a condition called transverse myelitis, which means I have a scar on my spinal cord, and I have partial, paralysis. So walking is very difficult. So, and I've been sexually abused by a doctor.
It's a lot.
A lot. But here I am with hope, talking about hope in spite of it all. I think for me, that drive and that tenaciousness, in spite of all of these terrible things that have happened, I still, through all of that, Lee, see the inequity. I'm still the white chick in all of this. And I know that, for other people, that sometimes it sounds uncomfortable when I say that.
Absolutely, for sure.
But I still see that, right? I still see that, and I experience it, and I feel it in my core. You see me getting emotional here,
absolutely.
Right?
No, I mean, I can see that you lead with your heart.
Yeah, I do.
And I think that's the differentiator. And in, as you say, it's tenacity, but there's a resilience that I don't know if all people feel they have that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because, even though my parents, brought us up in a Christian Reformed family, they grew up in occupied Holland during the Second World War as teenagers. And so I think when we were growing up, that we sat around and listened to their war stories on Saturday nights. I think they were experiencing PTSD and, just talking about these horrible stories of seeing, the Jew shot on the road and nobody going to pick him up because they know they're going to get shot if they go out there, right?
Oh my goodness, that's so traumatic. And then that plays out, right?
It plays out. It certainly does. Again, it's something that sticks with me even now, right? When I watch what's unfolding around the world right now, what's going on, this holy war that's going on, it's, terrible, awful. And I can't even, my parents had a tiny experience of that even, right? When I think occupied Holland versus what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
Even that.
It breaks
it's hard.
My heart.
It's hard though. It does break my heart.
I feel like at the end of the day, no matter which side one may fall, or someone's a humanitarian, it's like, this is just an injustice. It's real people. And I saw a video with a kid saying, like, I saw these things happen. Like, they're living with that. That's their lived experience, and it will inform their future.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that means for the future, because it takes great work and resilience to come out in a better way. I don't know. I don't have that experience, and I can't speak to that, but I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And when I talk to people who are survivors of trauma, we see this within our First Nations community, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. And even when it comes to working on this project, and, and I've been very clear about this when we were, raising the funds for it and going after grants. I was very clear. We are not going after dollars that are meant for the Indigenous community. It's hard enough for them to access their own funds. And we're not going for dollars that are identified for the Black community.
Right.
Right? We're taking mainstream funds and turning that into an initiative for the Black and Indigenous communities, because that's our obligation. That's something that we should be doing.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in other ways where you see, a so-called charity, a Christian charity working with an Indigenous group, and the Indigenous group somehow gets swallowed up in the whole story, the process or whatever. And I worry about that even with my project. It's not my project. Not my project. Erase that. I didn't say my. It's our. That to keep imbuing that authenticity that we talk about, and that hope and that relational piece for us means we're working with the Hamilton Regional Indian Center and the African Canadian Caribbean Association on building the relationship for the tenants, making sure that they get the supports they need, and making sure that they know them by name, right? Yeah. We say that when we talk about, it sounds almost biblical when you talk about the poor, know them by name.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we try and are trying to take that approach so that we know that someone who has experienced homelessness and will becoming housed, it's a tough process, right? It's a very tough process. They need a lot of support. They need culturally appropriate support. And again, for the Black community, particularly in Hamilton, that's almost non-existent, right? Yeah. So we're kind of building it as we go at the same time. And every time I go to an Ontario Health West meeting, I talk about it. And I, tell the administrators, we really need to build this more into your work. You need to create funding models that allow for Black-led representation around the table.
I love that. I mean, it's so powerful, and that you live that every day, and you have a seat at the table, and like in recognizing it, as uncomfortable as it may be for some people, you're using your voice, right? Like, you're not just saying, hey, like, I see something. You're actually being proactive and doing it. And it puts, I'm sure it wasn't comfortable when you first started.
No. But as with many things, as I age, it becomes more comfortable for me. It becomes easier for me, but I see the discomfort more clearly. So I'm a lot more aware of the impact when I say these things. Yeah. So I'm very intentional. It's not just, kind of, wouldn't it be nice? It's intentional. Yeah. And I tell you, I've walked away from tables when they haven't listened, right? I have physically left.
I think that's powerful, because even for myself, like when I think about you're young, you're eager, you want to kind of make a difference. You feel like you have to sit at you're like, oh, I'm at the table. I need to sit at this table. Yeah. But what you just said about walking away is also a big statement.
Yeah, it is. It creates a lot of impact. I've, in doing that, stopped a project and make them rethink of their whole approach and realize that they're colonizing culture all over again. Things like that,
Where do you find that courage? Where do you think, the first time you walked away from table, like, what was it?
I think after all these personal experiences I've had with some pretty deeply impactful things that have left me with PTSD,
Yeah.
Ironically, it's left me stronger in a way. The old saying, I hate that old saying, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes it does still kill me. I still struggle with it a lot, right? But there is a resilience in that. I have found all of these things have helped me realize inequity is so big and so strong. And again, for a white woman, this is just minor compared to anyone else.
That's to live every day. I mean, I appreciate you sharing. It's very vulnerable and very authentic, because I think a lot of people don't talk about it. Like when we talk about leaders, how did you get here and all this stuff, like it's easy to put the shine on, right? But I know that there's so much underneath it, right? And it comes from something. And you, in all the work that you have done, from what you've shared, demonstrates that resilience, demonstrates that your heart, like I feel the same way. Your heart has led you to each step.
Yeah.
And it's a journey.
Yes.
It's not a straight path.
No.
The fact that you can operate a submachine gun is right. Like I wouldn't have expected that.
I played with the Ramones,
Hey, that's really cool, right? Like you played with the Ramones. You're a punk.
Yeah.
Going from reform, like Dutch Anglican reform, to being a punk. How much of that influenced that choice?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, my son, he looks at me sometimes and he shakes his head. I can't believe you, Mom. He
You lived a full life.
I lived a full life. And I still am living a full life for sure. I don't want to give up, and that's part of it too. In spite of, how the transverse myelitis, which is the spinal cord issue, is a cousin to MS. It could be a precursor to MS, right? It's something that can be really debilitating. And I cry almost every morning when I get out of bed because it's hard to get up and walk. Like it's very painful.
Yeah. But
I do it, right? And then I remind myself at the end of the day, hey, I walked all day long on those legs screaming but I did it. And I'm going to rest today.
All those
and things. I have to get up tomorrow and do it again because I really don't have a choice. I just don't have a choice. I have to walk on these darn legs.
You're such a fighter. Such a fighter. I like to close every interview session with a favorite quote. And I love the quote that you shared with us. When they go low, we go high. Michelle Obama.
That's right.
Tell me about why that quote is a fave.
Well, I think, particularly working with a team in my organization right now, we've gone through a lot. Nobody expected COVID to hit us. And things have been really tough, right? And when things get tough, sometimes people start to knock heads. And so I try to imbue a lot of humor into our workplace. I do.
Humor is good.
Humor is good. And my team loves it and knows it. And they go with it. But I think that I have an obligation to show this young group of people that you can go high. You don't have to go low. Going low actually takes a lot of effort and energy. It's like when you tell a lie. It's hard to tell a lie because then you got to remember the truth.
Yep. Yeah.
It's easier just to remember the truth and stick with it, right? But with this group of young people, I really want to inspire and imbue in them that you can actually get some joy even in all this darkness.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about hope. That laughter really helps with that. And they see my tenacity and, they know that I've fought back and they see me fight back because I invite them to meetings so that they can learn how to fight back.
I love it.
I do.
Modeling. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, it is important. Well, I really appreciate you coming, sharing your story because it is a story that lives on and it is so powerful.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks for all your great work. It's inspirational.
You are an inspiration yourself. So
I'm just a connector.
Well, that's what we all are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode. You want to make sure to like, subscribe, and share so that you don't miss out on the next In Focus episode on topics that matter to you.